Well, hello there, and again, welcome to another session here on the web of Bible studies or perhaps a sermon series that we're going through. We hope that you're finding the material edifying and helpful in your walk and growth in knowledge and grace of Jesus Christ, because that certainly is our intent. We wanted to take, though, before we get started, this moment just to remind all of you that if indeed you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, feel free to go ahead and email us at billw@cgi.org. That's billw@cgi.org. Feel free to write at any time through the course of the presentations, because we want to know what you're thinking, and if indeed we're missing something that you'd like us to address, to draw our attention to it. So don't forget, ask some questions or make some comments and help us out with some feedback. We certainly do appreciate that as well. And again, that address is billw@cgi.org. And go ahead and feel free to do it at any time. So right now, without any further delay, let's get back to the sessions that we're studying this week.
Well, brethren, this is a special weekend in many respects, because in 2 days, I don't know how many of you had this on your mind. I did on my mind, only because it does come around once a year, and it's something I think that all of us should never forget, and that is the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Pearl Harbor. An amazing time for America in our history, and an amazing time for the world, because it commenced the expansion of what we've come to know historically as World War II. And frankly, the 20th century in many respects, I don't know how many of you really have thought about it in this way, but it really illustrates in so many regards on just how much America is hated. 100 years of wars and battles. I mean, when you look at the 20th century, it was chock full of a lot of destruction and death, invasions of other countries. We had Korea, we had Vietnam, of course, we had the Middle East, always seemingly as a, what you could say, tinderbox in so many regards, and the United States, of course, being dragged in to a lot of those battles. And it brought to my mind, and I couldn't help but to hearken back over here to Genesis chapter 49. Now, I've read this a bit here over the last few weeks, but I wanted to bring your attention back to this prophetic chapter. Now, this is a prophetic chapter, by the way, chapter 49, the book of Genesis. First verse will tell you that very clearly, that Jacob, about to die, brings his 12 sons around him after he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh in chapter 48, and proceeds to explain to them that this is how they're going to be. He's going to profile them, and he says right here in verse 1, for the last days. And you can see that he is basically setting down a premise, and the premise is, I'm about to explain to you guys, you 12 boys, how you're going to be, what you're going to represent as nations in the last days. And that's the operative, in the last days. And there you see it in Genesis 49, verse 1. Dropping down for the sake of time to 22, which is the tribe of Joseph, of which in 48, remember, Joseph's sons, the grandchildren of Jacob, were just blessed to become a great nation and a company of nations. That prophetically profiling them in the latter days would then make them out to become a great nation and a great company or family or commonwealth of nations. And the commonwealth of nations, remember, the younger would come before the older, Manasseh. And he would be a great nation also, Jacob said, and assured Joseph, their father, that he would be. But nevertheless, the point of it is, those two boys were from the tribe, their dad being Joseph. 22, chapter 49, book of Genesis, Manasseh and Ephraim are wrapped up in the label of Joseph, and here we see Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough. In other words, in the latter days, the nation of Joseph, that carrying the name of Israel, which the two boys were carrying the name of Israel, that's what Jacob said, let my name be on the lads. That's what he said there in 48. I'm not going back there, I don't want to belabor it because I don't have the time, but nevertheless, I wanted to bring this to your attention, in that this prophecy describes Joseph as a fruitful bough. a nation by a well whose branches would run over the well. In other words, it would be so affluent. This nation of Joseph in the latter days would be so rich and basically enriched with affluence and all kinds of material blessings that it would overflow its boundaries. That's what we're talking about here. That's what it's being said. And the archers have sorely grieved him. And of course, we understand that this word grieved comes from a Hebrew word. It means vexed. They hated him. People hate that nation for a lot of reasons, primarily jealousy, envy. They're too rich. They've got too much. 80% of the world's wealth in natural resources, with only about 5% of the world's population enjoying it. This is not right. And the world and the 20th century, as I try to portray here, I think is a good illustration of the fact of just how hated the United States has been. And that's only the last 100 years of the 20th century. We're in the 21st century. We're 20 years into the 21st century. But you could go back even before that, and you can see even our own brother nation, England, that we, from the get-go, in 1776 with the Revolutionary War, were born, the United States was born, frankly, brethren, born out of pain. Wouldn't you agree with that? It was born out of pain. It was constant revolution, separation, untanglement, kicking back, fighting, arguing, debating, and then people trying to tear it apart. Even the Civil War in the mid-1800s, in the 19th century. What did we have? We had 500,000 people, or more in some cases, who died. Why? Because of differences and debate. And we had slavery and states' rights and all these kinds of menageries and entanglements of differences of opinion that have all been targeted toward and designed to try to tear at the very fiber, very fabric of this great nation that's been now in existence for, frankly, as I've tried to portray over the last couple of weeks, you could make the case 400 to 500 years, even from the 1500s, because we go back to St. Augustine, which was settled back in, 1565, which was preceding, of course, the Declaration of Independence and all of that. But here in this portion of Scripture, back to this prophecy, it says in verse 23 of Genesis 49, bringing our attention back, the archers have sorely grieved, vexed, provoked him, that is Joseph, and shot at him, and hated him. The Hebrew word here is opposed, or persecuted him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, that is the God of Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, so you could put Israel in there. The God of Israel. His hands were made strong by the God of Israel. And we beat the Germans 2 times, World War I. World War II, and at the same time in World War II, in 2 theaters, on 2 fronts, in the Pacific and in the Atlantic. The Japanese Empire, who invaded us in a surprise attack at Pearl Harbor 80 years ago that got America officially into World War II, then began to fight the Germans on the other theater in the Atlantic. We all know Hitler and the tyranny that he represented with the Nazi Party and so forth. 2 fronts, 4.5 years of that World War II, and the God of Israel prevailed. Otherwise, we'd be speaking Japanese probably on the West Coast and German on the East Coast, without a doubt, because Hitler would have been successful, but he wasn't. America was able to dig themselves out from behind the 8 ball after being surprised and virtually the Pacific Fleet taken out, being able to repair those ships, build new ones, manufacture tanks right over here in Cleveland at the tank plant by Hopkins Airport, and bring them out with Rosie the Riveter building them, while the guys went off fighting with machine guns and bombs and hand grenades, driving tanks and trying to beat back the powers of tyranny out there in Europe as well as on the Pacific coast. But it goes on here. He says, from thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Verse 25, Genesis 49, even by the God of thy father who shall help you, and by the Almighty who shall bless you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lie under, blessings of the breasts of the womb. The blessings of your father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren, and we are even geographically separated from Europe, our brothers, who we understand, like France being Reuben and so on and so forth, the fact of we, America, stand alone, the tribes of Joseph in that regard, even England, and of course the island there is separate from Europe, as geographically it is portrayed. But my point in all of this, brethren, is it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. Even today, we have this cancel culture, reset globalist mob trying to continue to tear at the very fabric of the United States and to bring the United States down from what it represents in terms of freedom and liberties to the people that are indeed enjoying many of the blessings that we have had for pretty much our whole existence. But yet, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, we've got people, private interest groups, we've got, sadly, even leaders within our ranks, within our system, in roles of leadership that hate this country. They want to change it. They want to change the Supreme Court from 9 to, who knows, 15, 20, 21, odd number of some sort, 17. But they don't want 9. 9 isn't enough anymore. Why? Because it's perceived that it's going in the opposite direction of these that hate this country for what it stands for. They want to be able to, like I said, eliminate the Electoral College, or for that matter, go back and remove the Chinese Communist Party tariffs, of which are bringing billions of dollars now into the United States as a result of a fairer negotiated trade agreement with that country that, by the way, also hates our guts. And don't think for a minute that China really would not like to see the United States pushed out of the way. But essentially what I'm saying is that there are people among us that want to see the United States' assets, for all intents and purposes, surrendered, and to feed into this globalist community of nations, of which is still, by the way, going on as we ourselves being preoccupied with the political domestic issues that we're being faced with. Guess what? Heads up, attention, the globalist movement hasn't stopped. It is still going on as it has for the last, I guess you could make the case, 100 years or so, and even longer. There is a group called the Sustainable Development Goals Group. They held a meeting about a year ago or so, and they call themselves this SDG, a Sustainable Development Goals Group. And they're basically part of this globalist reset movement initiative, of which, as I say, essentially have pledged to forge financial support to achieve strengthening globalist institutions with a goal of 2030, and to re-engage things such as the Paris Climate Accord, the Iranian deal, and for that matter, even the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and taking the United States back into this movement so that the United States, can get back into the thick of financing its proliferation. And I'm not going to mince words in this because, again, I'm not advancing Republican talking points, brother. This is nothing political. I'm going to go back again for all of those of you who are a little bit nervous about talking about politics, about the fact that this is regarding policy. Every one of you, every one of you in this room, those of you who are watching us through the internet, have come to a point in your life where you have evaluated and assessed certain information that has caused you to change a point of your lifestyle. And here you are keeping Saturday for Sunday, right? Somewhere along the line, you were introduced to some information that you logically, in your mind, took in the ideas, the thoughts, through either reading, listening, or being talked to by somebody, and you digested that information, you evaluated and vetted it in whatever way you do, and you came to a conclusion that I'm no longer going to keep Christmas. True. I'm no longer going to keep Easter. True. I'm no longer going to keep Sunday. True. I'm going to start keeping holy days. I'm going to stop eating pork. I mean, somewhere along the line, you came into grips with information that changed your life, right? Changed the way you view things, the way your outlook. And guess what, brethren? Once you begin to understand, and we're going to get into this over the next couple of weeks. I'm not finishing today, by the way. This is just the opening segment. The opening segment of an ongoing development. So be patient with me. No tomatoes. But the point of it is that I want to make is that we need to be able to talk about political perspectives without thinking that the speaker, if indeed he favors a certain political point of view, is not advancing that political party. You with me? So, with that being said, all I'm saying is this guy, candidate Biden, why do I say this? Policy. If he has his way, will take the United States back into the thick of financing many of these globalist initiatives, of which this basic SDG, this Sustainable Development Goals group, that is led by globalists such as, here's another name for you, Bill Gates, here's another name for you, George Soros, Klaus Schwab, all these guys that attend these meetings, the Davos meetings and so on, which are nothing more than globalist meetings to bring these people together, Zuckerberg, and all these guys, billionaires, who are all about, brethren, controlling the world through a means of which they are the controllers. That's important to them. To them. Why do I and am I talking about this stuff? Because, brethren, things are changing around you if you haven't noticed. I mean, they're getting intensely interesting. I don't know how else to say it, and I'm trying to put as positive a spin on this as possible, because frankly, some of it is not very positive. I don't like having to be in by 10 o'clock. I didn't even like my mom and dad when I was 12 and 13 telling me, Billy, be home at 10. I didn't like that, let alone the government telling me when I'm an adult, you cannot stay out or go to a tavern or a bar and have an adult beverage after 10, because at 10:01 or whatever, the virus is going to get you. You know, I mean, and I know some of you share the idiocy of this in some respects. I understand it's not a hoax. I understand it is a real disease, and people are really getting sick by it. And sadly, I don't want to minimize this or dismiss it, mitigate it, because it's important that we recognize people are indeed dying from this CCP virus, which I refuse to call COVID, because that's nothing more than camouflage. This thing came from China. Point being, though, brethren, is that we are moving into some uncharted waters. And sooner or later, the geopolitical conditions that you are seeing around you today are going to become more severely worse. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because I'm speaking from what I want to talk about, that I haven't told you yet about. But you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. But I want you to stay with me, Because sooner or later, and I'm telling you right now, if the United States gets sucked back in to the globalist initiatives of which candidate Biden would love us to be in, and again, I'm speaking from policy. Why do I say that? Because I'm looking at the policies. I'm listening to the information coming to me from the horse's mouth. No disrespect intended, just using that as a figure of speech. You know what I'm saying? In other words, first person. I'm getting it from first person. How am I getting it from first person? Like you. I'm watching him on television. I'm watching and listening to what he's saying. I'm listening to his policies. I'm understanding what he's trying to tell me he's going to do. And I'm seeing now these guys that are being appointed into his cabinet. Same thing when I started going to the Cleveland Public Library and studying about Sunday and Saturday. It's the same thing when I started comparing with what the Catholic Church did to the Waldensians. It's the same principle, I'm looking at information, digesting the information, and saying, aha, Christmas is a Catholic doctrine. It is. Sunday is a Catholic doctrine. The Jesuits were not a good group of people. They've got a sordid history of murder, betrayal, sedition, treason. That's fact. How did I learn that? I studied it, and I understood the realities and the historical record of these events. It's not a CGI doctrine. It's history. And so it is with what we're seeing. It's history. Pearl Harbor, history. How did I know the bad guys and the good guys from World War II? Because I looked at Hitler, his policies, and what he stood for, and guess what? I didn't want to become a Nazi. Why? Because I understood the policies. It had nothing to do with Hitler. It had nothing to do with Roosevelt. As a matter of fact, I would prefer to be a Roosevelt follower at that time because he stood for liberty and freedom, even though he was a socialist in policies. But because of what was going on and the world was in the condition it was in with Hirohito in the Pacific and Hitler over in Europe, guess what? Roosevelt looked pretty good. He looked pretty good. So it's not about politics. Forget party politics. Brethren, we've got to be big enough to talk about policy and the realities of which we are contending with, and especially, brethren, especially as Christians. Because what's coming down on you? What's coming down on you, Christians, is not pretty. It's not pretty. And like in many cases, circumstances have a way of bringing out behaviors in people. Would you not agree with that? When you have a baby, a family has a baby, circumstances in the marriage change, right? When you're on the battlefield in war and your comrades in a foxhole and you're pinned down in a firefight, you learn about who your buddy is. Shoot! You know? What's the matter with you? Hang on. We're surrounded. Shoot the gun. Never would have thought that because he's a big guy when things are tough. My God. In war, you learn about people. You learn about people when it's no longer the walk in the rose garden. Guess what? We're not walking in a rose garden anymore, brethren. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing people behave in ways that I never would have thought. How about you? I'm seeing people, in some cases, reacting in ways that are surprising to me. There's a lot of anxiety in the air. I was reading on the internet just this last week of an 11-year-old boy, same age as my grandson, Preston, on a Zoom call during school, shot himself in the head. Shot himself in the head. He was depressed about what was going on. The parents were stunned. Never thought that was going on in their son's head. People are hunkered down, won't even walk out of their house in some cases because they're so fear-struck. My hats are off to all of those of you who are not taking this lightly, but nevertheless doing the best you can to function within the circumstances courageously and as normal and natural as you can, being vigilant, being cautious, not reckless, but not being fear-struck. Perfect love casts out fear. Fearless. We all ought to get hats. Fearless. Because we should be fearless in this day and age. Because, brethren, we haven't seen anything yet. This dry run, CCP virus 19, COVID, alias, aka COVID-19, is really romper room compared to what's coming, what is coming. And the question is, as we go forward in all of this, just how we are going to react. I'll be quite candid with you. The hypocrisy that I'm seeing exercised in the lives of some people, especially our leaders, is just maddening to me. And I have to get a hold of myself once in a while and just hold myself back and because, like you, it just disgusts me to see a restaurant owner arrested. Crime? Opened his business. This is America. He opened his business. My mom and dad owned bar after bar. My mother owned bars for 40 years. She was a bar owner. Her business would be destroyed because she didn't own it. It wasn't a big nightclub or anything. It was just a shot and a beer place on the corner in a neighborhood. It'd been destroyed now because she made her money after 10. There's a whole new group of people that come in after 10. Some people don't even get started till 10 o'clock. Come on, let's get real. This is the United States of America. And the fact of it is, the country is literally being destroyed in its economic base by virtue of some of these hypocritical engagements, restrictions, and limitations. And sadly, people are losing their business. I just watched it this morning. As a matter of fact, I was telling Melanie and Keith back there, we were talking about this story. On the internet, I was reviewing some things that I had on my notes that I'm not even on anymore. But nevertheless, I was reviewing them, and the girl, she owned a restaurant. And she set up a beautiful little tent place with a bunch of picnic tables under 2 or 3 tents. You know, like you have a party in your backyard, a tent, you know, is like for a party. And she's doing a selfie, and she's saying, I was just told, this is dangerous. And she's pointing to her where she had her tents, her 3 tents with the picnic tables. She says, I was just told by the mayor of Los Angeles, California is where it took place. She says, this is dangerous. This is too dangerous. I can't put anybody in there. And then she swings herself around, and she says, but over here, and you see 12 tents with chairs and tables all through the setup. And she says, but over here, this movie company I don't know whether it was MGM or, the Lion, Paramount, or whoever it was. She says, they're going to have a get-together. It's okay. They're safe over here, but 50 feet away over here, I can't have nobody because it's dangerous. And she's crying because she's losing everything she's invested. I felt sorry for her. It touched me emotionally because I can identify with that. I don't own my own business. My mom and dad, I saw my mom and my dad sweat, labor over their business day in and day out, tapping beers and setting up whiskey bottles and all of that. And then you have politicians telling us to stay home, stay home. In the meantime, the husband's out on his boat on his island enjoying what he's doing. And then, of course, you have the election that has gone on here recently, November 3rd, of which there is proof of fraud, without a doubt. But the media, the lamestream media, has literally ignored it, are complicit in hiding it and not giving it any kind of airtime or expression of publicity. Why? To keep it hidden. To keep it hidden. Why? There are people, I'm going to say it again, it's important we get this in our minds as Christians, that hate this country. They want this country removed. I was talking with Dave, and we're in agreement that the United States is an obstacle to the globalist agenda. And therein lies a big motivation in getting America out of the way, because it is an obstacle to the emergence of what I want to talk about. And that is the world-ruling government that is coming in the future, that we understand through biblical prophecy, the beast. So I said all that I've said to introduce to you what I want to talk about. And if you want a title on this, is basically questions about the beast's mark, or the mark of the beast. I want to explore. I'm not sure we're going to answer a lot of questions, but I want to store your minds up, brethren. Why? We are on the threshold. As you have seen what has happened with this minor, and I say it from the perspective of what I'm going to share with you over the next few presentations. But I'm saying what I'm saying by virtue of what we've seen in this, what I would call minor, by comparison to what we're going to be reading, event that we're all still experiencing, by the way, called the CCP virus. And I thought this would be a good time to maybe introduce this to all of us, simply because of the backdrop. And I'll be quite frank, the backdrop of this COVID-19, this CCP virus environment we find ourselves in, is a very good framing of what now we've been told for years gone by about the beast, and more specifically what I want to talk about, this mark of the beast. This mark of the beast. Like a funeral, oftentimes, funerals can be very impacting on people's lives, especially when the body of their loved one is now in that condition of death, and you as the presenter talk about death in the environment of the reality check that a funeral presents and provides for all those listening. Because now death is right in front of you as you see the loved one there in the casket. It is impacting and quite much more real in the minds of the viewer and listeners. And so I thought it would be good for all of us to go through this exercise, this, what you could say, cathartic experience of reviewing the mark of the beast specifically, and how it entangles itself and attaches itself to this coming world-ruling government. By the way, it is a socialistic world-ruling government. Why do I say that? Because it is going to be the combine, the coalescing of 10 kings operating as one, giving its power for a short time, 1 hour, figuratively speaking, a short time, to a tyrant that we understand to be the beast, described throughout your Bible in many locations. In many locations. So let's start by turning to one of those locations in the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation. We are introduced to this beast in chapter 13. And let me just say this at the outset before we really get into chapter 13. The book of Revelation is built around 3 sets of 7. Many of you are well aware of this. If you have had any background with the Church of God, you understand that there are three sets of 7. The first set of 7 are the 7 seals. The second set of 7 are the 7 trumpets. The third set of 7 are the 7 vials, or as some have called it, the 7 last plagues. Those are the 3 sets of 7. There are also scattered in and among, salt and peppered, spread through, interthreaded in, embedded in those 3 sets of 7, 4 major wars. And the news is they're still up ahead. And they're pretty big. Much bigger than World War II. They're still up ahead. One of them is coming quite early in the 3 sets of 7. It's coming as the 4th seal, or as some of you know them, as the 4 horsemen, the red, the black, and the pale. Those horsemen, those 4 horsemen, described in Revelation 6. It comes as the 4th seal. And the statement is in Revelation 6, verse 8, 25% of mankind is going to be destroyed. 25% of mankind, at the current numbers we have, is close to 2 billion, with a B, people. World War II's numbers, at most, if you really stretch them out, is somewhere between the area of 50 and 75 million, with an M. So this is major. This is major. Then you have 2 others that are mentioned in Revelation 9. We're not going to go there right now. The point, though, is that there is going to be an emergence in this play-out, in this scenario, in this saga, coming up in the future that is going to give birth to this government called Mystery Babylon. That's the beast. That's the name of the beast. Mystery Babylon. It's mentioned in Revelation chapter 17, identified with capital letters, of which we're going to be introduced to it here in Revelation 13. During this time of the rule of this Babylon government, this Babylonian environment, 2 witnesses are going to be held up in what is illustrated as a temple over in the city called Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. What city is that? Jerusalem. In Revelation 11, let me bring your attention over here real quickly. And in verse 1, let's just start there. There will be given a reed like unto a rod. The angel stood, saying, Rise, measure the temple of God, the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple, leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall then tread under foot 42 months. Mark that. It's an important length of time. 42 months. Keep that in mind. Also, understand, God's year consists of 12 30-day months. Not 28, not 31, not 22, 12 30-day months. If you take 1,260 days, another number, mark, another number, divide it by 30, you come out with 42 months. Another term, 3.5 years. All synonymous. 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. All synonymous, all talking about the same time. These two guys, and I'll tell you why I say that in a minute, but it says here in chapter 11, I will give power unto my two witnesses, chapter 11, book of Revelation. They shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in jeans and cutoffs. Sackcloth. They're not going to be perhaps well-dressed, looking professional with ties. These guys are going to be streetwise. These guys are going to be basically engaged on behalf of God, doing a prophetic work that does indeed, in this case, give witness to the beast and the government that it is a work of Satan the devil. And they, that is the beast, this Babylonian government and its leaders, are not going to like those two guys. As a matter of fact, those two guys are going to have a target on their head for the 1,260 days that they are going to be prophesying. And the beast, the Babylonian leadership, those that have the power to engage and attempt to try to arrest or kill these two guys, are going to do their best to do just that, kill them and get them out of the way. They are going to be alive during the 3.5 years, the 1,260 days, the 42 months, the beast is going to be ruling. The Babylonian government is going to be ruling. And these guys are going to be a pain in the cuckoo for them. A pain in the neck for them. And as a result, in this case, are going to do everything they can to conjure up what they can, that is the Babylonian leadership, to kill these guys. Verse 4, there are 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before God of the earth. If any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth. Now, not literally, but certainly something is going to be within their power that is going to provide them the ability to devour their enemies in defense for their own safety. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So they're going to be untouchable in some respects through supernatural protection. It becomes quite obvious. They have the power, like Elijah. This is a ministry of a latter-day Elijah. This is a real latter-day Elijah ministry. John the Baptist, by Jesus' own words, was called the ministry of Elijah. These guys, by what they do, here in verse 6 described, power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and they have power over waters to turn it to blood, like Moses and Aaron, when they freed the Israel. This is going to be a very surreal time, brethren, for mankind. A very surreal time, but it's up ahead. He says, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will, meaning drought, no rain, things that go along this line that are indeed going to essentially hamper, encroach on, and essentially make it very difficult for the people enjoying the Babylonian environment that the beast will be providing to enjoy. So in verse 7, it continues, and when they shall have finished their testimony, that is their prophecy, when their job is done, these two guys, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So at some point, these two guys are going to be indeed killed. God is going to remove the hedge of protection that he had around them, and when they are done and God feels at the end of this 42-month period is over, they will be essentially available to the beast to have his way with them. And here we read, and they shall have finished their testimony. The beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them. This is verse 7, Revelation 11, and shall overcome them and kill them. Their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. That's where I got that from. This is all happening in Jerusalem, in the Middle East. They were held up in something called or considered to be a temple. Good reason to believe, brethren, that something is going to be built. It may not be as ostentatious as Solomon's temple, but it is going to be something where ultimately, at some point, these two guys are going to be held up in for 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. That's what we're reading. Their dead bodies are going to lie in the street of that great city. Verse 9. And they of the people and the kindreds and the tongues and the nations, they shall see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and shall not permit, that's what the word suffer means, the Greek word suffer, their dead bodies to be put in graves. So for 3.5 days, be it on the internet, never could realize back in 1920 what we're talking about here, could you? 1930, 1940. We can now. CNN, there they are. Look at them, they're dead. The whole world can see them, and they're going to leave their bodies sit in the streets where they killed them. So the whole world can confirm the fact they're dead. Whew. Finally. Got rid of those pains in the cuckoo. For 3.5 days. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice, verse 10, over them and make merry. Look at this, it keeps going. John keeps writing, and shall send gifts like Christmas, one to another. Because these, here it is, this is why I said they were men. 2 prophets. They're not angels. They're prophets, human beings, physical, flesh and blood, speakers for God, like Isaiah, like Jeremiah, like Micah, prophets of old, John the Baptist, who was the last of the prophet line. These 2 guys, 2 prophets, dead now, 3.5 days, lying in the street with the people of the world, celebrating, giving gifts. The wicked witch is dead. The wicked witch, I figuratively speaking, a Wizard of Oz. Oh, the witch, look, there's her feet under the house. She's dead. And then the fairy comes, and says, look what you've done. Dorothy, I was going to say Mary. Dorothy, You remember the movie? The wicked witch, they're dead. Yay, they're dead. Here, have a gift. Yeah, let's drink. Open up the champagne. They're dead. Yay. They were nothing, even though they were killing people with supernatural powers when they got near them for 3.5 years. And all the world saw that. Even the beast leader, even the beast himself and the false prophet themselves saw that they could not get these guys. They could not penetrate the protection for 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years, over and over and over, day in and day out. They would strategize. They would try to figure out, how are we going to get them? Well, let's sneak up on them at night. How are you going to do that? Well, I don't know. Put on body shields. Drive up a tank. Brethren, all I'm saying is, I was human, and I was part of the gang that was to take those two guys out. I'd be thinking about all kinds of scenarios on how to take them out. And every time we would go up to them, supernaturally, somehow they'd kill us. And for 3.5 years, this is going on. Duh. Can anybody figure this out? These two guys are supernaturally protected? And that maybe what they're saying is true? And that we are the bad guys? I'm talking about the beast in this role, if you follow me. So, he says here, John does, he continues, the two prophets' gifts in another, verse 10, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on, tormented them for all this time, this 3.5 years. And after 3 days, now watch this, after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God enters into them, both of them. They stood up on their feet, and great fear, I hope I'm able to see this. Man, I'm telling you, this would be so cool, don't you think? These two guys are dead for 3.5 years. All these people are dancing around saying, yay, yay, here's a gift. Hey, bread with open champagne. Yeah, the wicked witch is dead, man. And all of a sudden, you all right? Yeah, I'm all right. What happened? I don't know. What do you think happened? Were we dead? Yeah, maybe we're dead. I don't know. What's going on, Because they were out. 3.5 days, they were out. Out cold, dead. Immobile, unconscious, dead. But God brought them back to make a point. To make a point. They stood up, and great fear, verse 11, fell upon them, that is, those of the world, those of the Babylonian system, which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up here. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies, those that hated them, those that were celebrating, literally saw them ascend and disappear. Now, they weren't converted to spirit. A lot of people get confused on this. This is just a physical resurrection, much like Elijah, much like Enoch. They were just physically transported supernaturally. They weren't changed yet because Christ has not returned. Keep that in mind. The resurrection happens when? Jesus returns. This is not the seventh trumpet yet. As a matter of fact, if you're alive and you happen to see this, you're going to know where you are in the prophetic scenario. Wait till we read the next scriptures. You're going to see what I mean. But my point in this, these guys were physically lifted up and taken away. Out of the picture. They're done. You're over. You've served your purpose as far as God the Father is concerned through Christ and Michael, the archangels, and all of his group. And now they go to the bench. They walk off the field and go to the bench, and they can sit and relax. They served their purpose. But here, the story continues. They heard a great voice saying, come up here, and they did, verse 13, and in the same hour, there was a great earthquake. 10% of the city of Jerusalem falls, and in the earthquake were slain of men. 7,000 people were killed, and the remnant were afraid, those around, and gave glory to God. Finally, now they're getting the picture. and the second woe is past. Behold, the third woe comes quickly. Brethren, if you're alive and you happen to be able to see this, you know you have just seen the sixth trumpet complete. The second woe. There are three woes: the fifth trumpet, the sixth trumpet, and the seventh trumpet. Those are the three woes. They're synonymous. Three woes and the last three trumpets. If you're alive and you see this happen, you know exactly where you are. And guess what? Like on a roller coaster getting up that first hill, you better buckle up, because the seventh trumpet is now about to blow. Oh. But like Revelation, it has inset chapters. And chapter 11 takes you through this scenario in parallel with the beast and puts you right in the thick of the beast's existence and a certain segment of what the beast was experiencing, the Babylonian mystery government was experiencing. And chapter 12 is like an inset that is an interruption, a sidebar, and then it comes back to chapter 13 to give you a backstory of who the two witnesses were preaching to. Because you have it up here in verse 7, look at this. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast, Revelation 11, verse 7, the beast, you see that? That ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against it. But you haven't been introduced to the beast yet. You can read from Revelation 1 through 11, you haven't been introduced to the beast yet. You don't even know what that beast is yet. You don't get introduced to the beast of what these two guys in chapter 11 were dealing with until chapter 13. Chapter 13. And in this particular case, in chapter 13, we now get formally introduced to what chapter 11, verse 7 was referencing, the beast, and who the two witnesses were preaching to. So, we are now about to engage on what I want to talk about. And that'll have to wait until the next time. So with that, we're going to pick up on Revelation 13, because we're going to kind of drill down on this over the next few presentations to continue to add color and context to what we are indeed preparing for up yet in the future.